3 messages before today's interview educates and motivates you. First, if you're a domain name investor, don't you have unique legal needs that require domain name technical know-how and industry experience? That's why you need David Westlow of Wiley Ryan. Go search for David Westlow on Domain Sherpa, watch his interview, and you can see for yourself that he can clearly explain issues, can help you with buy-sell agreements, deal with website content issues and UDRP actions, and even help you write your website terms and conditions. David Westlow is the lawyer to call for internet legal issues. See for yourself at newmediaip.com. Second, managing multiple domain name marketplace and auction site accounts is a pain. Inevitably, you forget to sign into one and you lose a great domain, or worse. Now imagine using a single, simple to use and comprehensive control panel to manage all of your accounts. That's Protrata. You can set up search filters, analyze domains, automate bidding, list domain names for sale, buy domains across all major marketplaces. Protrata also has a new semantic engine that builds Google-friendly websites with rich content and network feeds. Sign up at protrata.com to get 20 free credits and start building and monetizing your domains today. Finally, if you have questions about domain names, where should you go to ask them? The answer is dnforum.com. Not only is DN Forum the largest domain name forum in the world, it's the best. You can learn about domain names and the industry, buy and sell domain names, talk about the domain name news that's happening in the industry, and even meet domainers just like yourself. Register for a free DN Forum account and begin advancing your skills and knowledge today. And when you do sign up, send me a friend request so we can connect on DN Forum. Here's your program. Hey everyone, my name is Michael Seiger and I'm the publisher of DomainSherpa.com, the website where you come to learn how to become a successful domain name entrepreneur and investor directly from the experts. ICANN is lifting the lid on the domain industry's equivalent of Pandora's box, releasing what will be a flood of generic top-level domains, or gTLDs. While no one knows exactly what effect this will have, one thing is certain: everything we've known about domains and domaining is about to change. How will it affect the domain industry? How will it affect your business? Today we're joined by Jennifer Wolfe, founder, president, and managing director of Wolfe Domain, a consulting firm that specializes in digital brand strategy. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thanks, it's great to be here.
Jennifer, I saw that you've recently been appointed to ICANN's Generic Names Supporting Organization Council. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm very honored and very excited.
For those in the audience not familiar with the GNSO, can you describe it briefly? How many people are on the council? How does it work?
Sure, absolutely. The GNSO Council is comprised of 23 individuals. A portion of those represent registries and registrars and certain stakeholders within the ICANN community. And then there are certain at-large members like myself who represent the internet users community. The purpose of the GNSO is to develop and make recommendations to the board of directors on policy with regard to domains, to top-level domains specifically.
Got it. And is this a policy group that is actually listened to? You know, I'm very ignorant of the whole ICANN process. Is it, you know, I know my city government, and we get these citizen groups together and they come up with ideas and they spend a lot of time and then they provide that input to the city council, and sometimes it's just ignored. How does it work with ICANN and the GNSO Council?
Sure. It's very similar in a lot of ways. ICANN is a not-for-profit corporation, but it really functions as a global stakeholder group. You know, it's a bottom-up organization intended to listen to the stakeholders of the internet and then try to set policy that serves the greater good. That's really the goal. But it's like any other political animal. There are politics being played. There are people who are listened to, people who are not listened to. You know, I think certainly the GNSO does drive policy that ICANN's board follows, but the board of directors ultimately has the decision-making authority on the specific policies that are set forth. But there's a really smart group of people working on the GNSO and looking out for all of these stakeholder interests to try to ensure that the internet is expanding and evolving as it should, and serving the needs of internet users all over the world.
That makes sense. And so in my local town, if I want to volunteer on one of the councils, I pretty much volunteer my time. I drive myself. It's a lot that I'm providing if I were to do that. Is it the same for people on the council? Do you have to travel on your own dime to ICANN meetings for the GNSO councils and take time away from work in order to have to provide your input to the council?
Sure. It is absolutely a volunteer position. So it is people who have an interest in serving the ICANN community and the internet community at large. ICANN does provide some support with regard to travel because the meetings do occur all over the world 3 times a year. But it is a strictly volunteer role. So it is, I as the other council members do have to make the decision that I'm going to take time away from the work that makes my living and that furthers my career to dedicate some time to serving.
Sure. Yeah. And not only time away from your work and time away from billable hours or working for clients or what have you, but time away from your family and time away from your home and all the other things involved. Well, thank you for doing that, Jennifer. Do you feel like, and you haven't actually started this position from what I understand. You start October 19th. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. I was just appointed and my term will start at the conclusion of the upcoming ICANN meeting in October.
Excellent. And so you haven't actually been in it, but it's got to be pretty exciting. Do you feel like you have an active role in internet history, providing that input that may actually change the way the internet runs?
Absolutely. And that's what really attracted me to the opportunity to serve, is that I feel like it really has a meaningful impact, and that with the experiences that I have, that I think are unique in a lot of ways, I can bring something very valuable to the ICANN community. I think it's also important they look for diversity. There aren't a lot of women involved, so I'm very happy to be one of those women who are serving the ICANN community.
Great. All right, so I think I understand how the responsibility works, and it's a very cool opportunity, and I wish you the best of luck in changing the policies for the better. But let's chat about Wolfe Domain, your advisory consulting business. And I should point out that your website is WOLFE domain.com. When was wolfedomain.com launched, and when was the service, your advisory service, when did you first start offering it?
Sure. We actually started the company this year, in the middle part of this year. We spun it out of the law firm that I'm the managing partner of. I have a number of other partners in our law firm that's located out in Spokane, Washington, Cincinnati, Ohio, and New York City, and that's an intellectual property law firm. And that's part of how we became involved with the gTLD initiative, which is really advising clients on protecting their brand and understanding whether they should or should not move into the space. As we started working with clients, it became very clear to me that a new industry was really going to evolve and emerge out of this, because the gTLD landscape is very complex, and it directly intersects a number of stakeholder groups within organizations, from the legal department to the digital, the marketing department, the IT department. And I immediately saw that companies were going to struggle with how do they cross over all of these different sectors within their company and develop a cohesive strategy. So about the middle part of this year, we decided this is a standalone company. It's not just an add-on to a law firm. And so we spun it out and formed a new entity that's in Cincinnati, Ohio, and New York City right now.
Okay, so you were finding that clients were coming to you and saying, we've got this issue, and you understand the term silo in corporate America, where you've got IT here, and you've got marketing here, and you've got legal here, and nobody seems to talk to each other unless there's some major issue. So you decided that instead of being just a legal service, you were going to offer consulting services across the entire organization to help them figure out their gTLD strategy.
Absolutely. And that's really where I think we have some unique specialties, is that we understand how to cross over those bridges. And it does take some communication skills to understand that you talk to the IT department in a different way than you talk to the law department, and in a completely different way than you talk to the marketing department. But you have to bring them all in a room at some point in time so that decisions can be made. And particularly in the gTLD environment, there's a lot of money at stake in terms of just investing in acquiring, certainly in defensive strategies, now that we're going to move to a world of 1,400 top-level domains instead of 23. That changes everything. And all of these different stakeholders within the organization need to understand what's happening, and then somebody has to bring it together into some sort of ROI for them.
Yep, definitely. All right. So how do you describe Wolfe domain to somebody unfamiliar with your company that maybe works in corporate America?
To somebody just in corporate America, the first thing is we have to explain what the gTLDs are and that the internet is about to undergo a major paradigm shift. Once I get their attention and am able to briefly describe how the internet's going to change and how it really will impact their entire digital strategy, which leads to all of these other things we've just discussed in marketing and IT and legal, then they're very interested in what can we do and how can we help them. But the first step that I'm finding right now is we're really still in a phase of education. We have briefings that we've prepared, and my first step is always I need to brief your C-suite. I need the very top level people to understand the magnitude of what's about to happen so that we can get the resources we need to do the work.
Yeah. So just before we hit the record button on the interview, we talked briefly about Six Sigma, a process improvement methodology used throughout corporate America that originally started in manufacturing environments and then migrated to transactional environments and service environments, and how you were actually a certified Six Sigma black belt, which means that you understand that everything in business is done through process. And I remember when I was at GE in the mid 90s, and Jack Welch, one of the named one of the greatest business managers of the century, was implementing Six Sigma across the entire GE business, hundreds of thousands of employees, and changing the culture of the organization. I remember how important it was to go directly to the C-suite, make sure that everybody reporting into the CEO was all on the same game plan with the same understanding about how things were going to change, and was bought into it. So when you say that you need to go to the C-suite to make sure that there's buy-in and understanding and a game plan, it makes perfect sense. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily think in those terms. They think, well, let me talk to the IT department. Let me talk to the marketing department.
Right. No, that's absolutely right. And again, I think with the changes that are coming, you really do have to involve these different groups within the company. It can't just be done in one department. If it does, it's going to fail.
Okay. So let's talk about digital strategy, because you've mentioned that a couple of times. What does digital strategy mean?
I'm sure if you ask a room full of digital strategists, they would have all sorts of different answers. And I think that's one of the struggles that I find in a lot of companies is they're not sure where digital resides. Mm-hmm. There may be a room full of 20-somethings who are responsible for what's going on Facebook and Twitter and so forth. There might be a marketing effort. It might come from the CMO. It might not. It's just very fragmented, and it's very different in companies. And what I see happening now is that there is going to have to be a consolidation of the digital strategy. With the domain name space changing the way it will over the next couple of years, I think what we'll see is domain names really become an anchor to your digital strategy. That's where people go, when they go back to their computer, or if it's their flat screen hanging on the wall, that domain name is going to be the anchor to your entire strategy. And then, of course, you have to interconnect. What are you doing in social media, and what are you doing with apps or mobile devices? And they all have to be interconnected. And I think right now those are very fragmented in most companies.
Okay, so the digital strategy includes your social networks, your marketing, your technology, your apps, your mobile strategy, and you think that everything is going to be anchored by the domains.
I think domain names will become the anchor, because I think we're about to move to this world of 1,400 top-level domains categorized into lifestyle, media, search, navigation, commerce. All of these different categories of generics will start to be used, and that's going to be confusing for a lot of people. I think that we'll see some of the big digital movers educate consumers, and I think if certain companies are successful at their strategy, then consumers will adopt, because we know consumers adopt to new technology and new ways of doing things. But with that, companies then have to figure out, well, how do I interconnect all of these things that we have going on? Because if they stay fragmented, they're not going to be successful. There's going to have to be somebody in companies who's responsible for cohesively bringing this all together. Right. And then again, crossing over the stakeholders. When you need to focus on brand protection, you've got to work with the legal department. When you have technical issues, you've got to work with the IT department. Yeah. And I think that's an evolution that's been occurring over the last few years.
Who do you think is going to be the biggest company to educate consumers on the new domain name gTLDs? Do you think it's going to be like an Amazon or that goes out and buys their domain name extension and suddenly people start to get how this works? Or do you think it's going to be Google just saying, hey, we don't care what the domain is, come search here, you click through, and maybe you'll pick up that we've got some new domain names, new gTLDs working.
I think Google has applied for 101 top level domains. Amazon has applied for 76. Microsoft has applied for 11. I think that when those companies, what I'd say those big digital players, when they start to roll out their top level domains, they are going to educate consumers. And certainly we know all three of the big search engines, Bing, Yahoo, and Google, have all applied for top level domains. So the theory is they will evolve their algorithms to factor in top level domains. And top level domains are inherently categories. So search will likely evolve to factor in the top level domain as a categorical directing point to what is that website about. And I think that's where we're going to see a big shift. I think, if you look, we had almost half of Interbrand's top global brands applied for top level domains. 36 of the Fortune 100 companies applied for top level domains. I think that the banks, JP Morgan, Citigroup, all of the major banks have applied for top level domains. And when they really educate consumers that, hey, don't trust a .com because that could be fraudulent, only trust .jp Morgan or .pnc. When they educate consumers that .com is questionable, I think we're going to see a big shift.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it will be interesting because I know my mother's never going to be able to understand that. So it will be interesting to see how much of the population won't get it and will just need to move out of the internet realm and when new people will get it. Do you view this as like a decade or 2-decade transition to get a majority of people, say in the US or in the world, to understand how the top level domains work?
No, I think a decade is way too long. I think it'll be a couple of years, of course. If you look at the rate of adoption, even a Facebook, and then you launch Twitter and Pinterest, and you look at how much faster people are quickly learning about these social media tools. Hey, I can go do all of these things, and people get it. They get it faster and faster. So I think we're going to continue to see that accelerated rate of adoption by consumers and by internet users. And again, I think that if the message comes in loud and clear that only trust this branded site or only trust find everything related to tennis on .tennis or .golf. I think that when it becomes easier for people to find what they're looking for, once they get over that hurdle, then we're going to see a real rapid rate of adoption. So I think that's where all companies, even those who didn't apply, need to start to understand how this is going to impact navigation of the internet. And again, that's where it intersects with social media and with apps, because people get to your website from different sources. And so how are you using search versus social media versus your app and mobile technology to get people to your website and to buy products and services from you and connect with your brand?
You're advising companies every day about their digital brand strategy and how they should be positioning it. I'm interested to know what you think when you're watching TV and a commercial for a company, a major Fortune 100 company comes on, and say it's, Citibank, or say it's, some website out there, and some company out there, and I don't know specific examples, but you see them, instead of pointing them at the end of the commercial to the company name.com or whatever TLD, they actually point people to facebook.com / the company name. Right. What's your thoughts about that?
I think that that's really interesting, and I think it's because those companies understand that their targeted consumer is living their life on Facebook. And so if Facebook is a centralized portal to them, that they're gonna capture them more easily. And I think the theory is also then they can track that they're coming in through Facebook and know that that's working. I think that we will see a trend away from that, because as valuable as that is, ultimately, if those companies have their own top level domain, they're going to be able to more easily direct consumers to them, and they might more easily remember that top level domain. Instead of trying to remember a long string .com, it'll be that much easier. And the second point related to that is a lot of those companies are promoting contests or promotions, things that might be a one-time event, and they likely can't get the .com. So they need to have their Facebook as the portal, because they can't get a .com or something that will be memorable enough that in a 30-second commercial spot, the consumer is going to remember it.
Right. And then when people interact on Facebook, then their friends see it, and if they have the same demographics, then they get some viral aspect to it. So there's positive and negatives for directing people directly to facebook.com.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Great. All right. So let's talk about, Wolfe domain you've got clients. We talked briefly before the interview about some of the clients. Are you allowed to name some of the clients that you're consulting with about digital strategy?
Sure. A couple of clients, when I was talking with a lot of clients prior to the application period, there were questions about, is this worth it or not? And my response was always, I can tell you what it's going to cost to do this. And then if it fails, I can tell you right now, this is how much money you'll lose. But if you don't do it and it does change everything, you could be out of business. So which way do you want to go?
Why do you say they could be out of business if they don't apply for a gTLD?
So I say that, and obviously that wouldn't happen in a year or 2 years, but in a 5 to 10 year range, what I think we'll see happening is that the flat screen on your wall is not going to be connected to your cable box. It's going to be connected to the internet. And I think pretty much most people understand that's the evolution of where we're headed. We see Google buying up fiber optic cable. We see Apple trying to develop the devices that will actually deliver that high-speed access to your TV. So if you take that out to a next level, what that means is top-level domains become the channels that you're channel surfing on the cable box right now. That's what you're going to be surfing and using as those channels on your flat screen TV that's connected to the internet. So in my opinion, any company in the media business needed to buy one of these right now to secure that, what I call that internet real estate that's so important. Because this is just like what happened in .com back in the 90s. There was this rush to buy up all of these domain names. Mm-hmm. The same thing is happening now, only in the top-level domain space. So because brands were allowed to basically purchase their top-level domain and close it off for their use, that was a really unique opportunity for media companies to basically make their claim and own their channel.
What other clients do you have?
Sure. So just on the flip side of that, since that was an applicant, we're also working with non-applicants, and they've given me permission to talk about them as well. The Nestle company is very much on the forefront of this. They're a very strong IP company. They had decided for very strategic reasons not to apply, but now they're really looking at, okay, where do we go? Where do we go from here? What should we be looking at from an offensive and defensive standpoint, and just trying to navigate the complexity of it. If you pull up the list of all 1,900 strings, it's pretty overwhelming. And so I think for anyone to just look at it, and we've spent hours and hours and hours, of course, digging through it, dissecting it, analyzing it, breaking it down, and then creating a methodology to help clients figure out what is relevant to them and what isn't, because you're not gonna pursue 1,400 strings.
Right.
You're gonna have to understand what's really relevant to you and what isn't.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right. So that makes sense from your applicants and non-applicants standpoint in how you're working with them. I also read on your website that you offer a digital mapping technology tool.
Right.
What is it, and how do domain names fit into that tool that you're offering?
Sure. It's really a methodology, and then it's a way of basically dissecting this list of the 1,400 strings that will eventually launch into the internet over the next 2 years, mm-hmm. and then looking at your brand and determining, where do I fit within this? Or if you're a generic, where does your portfolio fit within what's happening here? How does that migrate from a .com or .co or .net environment to this now 1,400 possibilities? So it's really, what we've created is a graphical way of plotting what's relevant and helping companies to visually see. Because as I said, if you took an executive and handed them this list of 1,900 strings with all of this information, it would be meaningless to them.
Right.
But if you can take them through an exercise and a methodology that graphically shows them, where does their brand fit with their competitors, with their verticals and their supply chain, because that's also relevant to understand somebody who today could be your customer, later could be your competitor. And you need to look at what they're doing, because these top-level domains create the opportunity for some disruptive innovation and for new business models to emerge. So I think you have to look at your competitors, your customers, anybody in your vertical and your supply chain, and know, are they moving in this space? What are they doing? And then, of course, the 900 plus generic terms that will be open to anyone to buy. do any of those categories fit into your brand or into your space? Because if they do, you need to know who might be buying those up, and you need to make sure that when they do open the doors and you can buy your domain, that if you want to buy something there, that you get in line fast.
Yeah, definitely. So as an engineer and a Six Sigma practitioner in the past, I love methodologies and I love processes.
Yeah,
so
too.
I'm sure that large corporations that look to, a methodology to figure something out, to make sure they're not leaving pieces out that they didn't think about, would appreciate that. Do you find that your consulting firm do you feel that large corporations tend to like the process that you walk through in evaluating TLDs?
They do, and again, I think the issue for some of these large corporations is, in many cases, the C-suite doesn't even know that this is happening.
Right.
And so when you start to introduce it, they say, "What? What are you talking about? Why is anything going to change?" It's unbelievable to them. So you have to immediately earn their trust and the credibility. Say, let me talk you through something and let me show you in a briefing why everything's going to change. And what I've been experiencing is, once I take them through just a short 10-15 minute briefing explaining how things are about to change and why, their eyes are wide open saying, "Oh my gosh, how long do we have to respond to this?" Because they understand that we all live our lives on the internet. The internet is a foundation to every business. I spoke recently even, with smaller businesses who are in manufacturing, not necessarily in a consumer business, but they still run their business off the internet. And how people find them is critical. So it really does impact every company out there.
But what do you say to the C-level, the CEO, COO, CMO level person within the organization that says, I remember when .info came out, and I remember when .pro came out, and what happened to those? Why should we be spending $185,000 on an application and potentially another $500,000 or $1 million down the road to negotiate and try and buy .food when we can just buy our own name .food and for $9 or $30 down, 5 years down the road, and be done with it?
Right. And so the big difference there, and this is, everybody asks that question, and it's a great question, because most of the other top level domain extensions have not been enormously successful. The difference here is the sheer scale. We have never before had brands have the opportunity to own their brands. So when we're looking at this large number of very famous brands going to launch and educate consumers, that is going to have an impact. And then when we look at the sheer number of 900 plus generics, 101 of those owned by Google, they're going to have an impact. Just the scale of this is going to have a greater impact. Those others were launched one at a time, and if they didn't put enough money behind marketing it and driving it, it just wasn't as successful. So I think the sheer scale of this is going to be different. And again, I think that to me, the big issue is if some of these companies educate consumers that .com is where the fraudulent people are. That's where the phishing, sites are. That's where people are trying to trick you into going to a typo squatting site. I think if they educate people in that way, it's going to have a real impact on the consumer belief of, do I trust something on .com with regard to a brand or not?
Yeah, but it's not necessarily the case. Like, I run domainsherpa.com, and it's not a phishing site, and people would argue that .com is more trustworthy than .net and .org and .info and anything else that might come out. So
absolutely,
I hear what you're saying, that the sheer number of top-level domains is going to be enormous. And clearly Google's not afraid to throw millions of dollars at something just at the possibility that there might be a big payout, because they make more than enough profit in their business to do so. So I'm still not convinced that just by the sheer number the internet is going to change. 10 years from now, when I've got my entire wall, instead of painting it, it's now digital display, because it's just going to be so cheap that it's going to be cheaper for me to put in insulated digital displays rather than paint my walls. And I can hook it up to the internet. Why wouldn't I just point it to a .com as opposed to a .food when I need to look up recipes in the kitchen?
Sure. And again, I think that's going to come down to how well do these companies execute. Certainly the scale is going to make it easier to educate, because it's going to happen all at once with a lot of companies. So that makes it a little bit easier. And certainly, I don't think .com is going to go away. I think it's going to be diluted. I think that the power of .com, as that's where you want to have your website, will ultimately be diluted as we start to see how things unfold with all of these other new top-level domains that launch into the internet. And just to the point, I know this is a really hard concept for a lot of people to grasp because we've been living in a .com world since the internet began. But I have this great video clip I use in a lot of presentations with Katie Couric on the Today Show when they were talking about what is this thing called email. And this was just back in the early 90s. It wasn't really that long ago. And nobody used email. It was unheard of, and nobody understood why would anybody send an email to somebody? Why would you need to do that? Now it's just part of our lives. I think anytime a paradigm shift is coming, there are going to be people who say, I don't believe it's going to change. I don't think anything is going to be altered by this. Why would we need to change? But I think if we look at just the history of business, it's changing at an accelerated pace. So I think that it's foolish for a company to just say, I don't think it's going to change. You have to hedge your bets. You have to look at it and think strategically. The great thing about this program is it's not going to go live until the end of 2013 and into 2014. So to me, this is the time that businesses should be thinking about, what am I doing? Because you've got time to plan. You've got a lot of time to plan. If you wait until it's too late, it's going to be just like the .com rush. Somebody's going to have the domain name that you want.
Yeah. So what do you feel is your biggest challenge as a strategist consultant to large corporations to help them figure this out?
The biggest challenge that I face is figuring out who to talk to first, because I have a lot of contacts in legal departments, but they are dealing with it from a brand protection standpoint. Their job is not to figure out what do we do going forward. That's someone else's job. And I think it's this general theory of the internet's not going to change, or I've never heard of this. So the biggest challenge is finding the right person to talk to and then briefing them on, here's what's happening and here's why it's important. And whether you think it's going to change or not, you still need to have a plan.
Definitely. Is Wolfe Domain invested in any gTLDs coming out? Do you have a stake in any of them?
No, we do not.
Okay.
We do not. It's nice because it puts us in a really objective, we're not trying to push one or the other, so we're in a very objective position to offer advice.
Definitely. And so do you see that Wolfe Domain will have a lifespan up until, 2014, and then people will start to figure it out, and then you won't have as many consulting customers? Or do you see that your business is going to continue to grow in the future because more companies will understand the need, and you'll start moving down from Fortune 100 companies to global 5,000 companies, let's say?
Absolutely. I think this is going to continue to evolve. We're looking right now at a 2 to 3 year window for the internet to start to shift, for this paradigm shift to occur. Even once it starts to occur, companies are going to need continual somebody out there who's really knee-deep, deep dive into the space and bringing back, ideas from the work that they're doing out there. And that's where I think we'll have a lot of value. The other thing is that ICANN is going to offer, at least they plan to offer, a second round of TLD applications. So if 3 years from now or 4 years from now, ICANN says, hey, this has worked great, we've proven it didn't have any impact on the stability of the internet, it's been really successful, let's have another round, then that's going to open up for a whole new set of companies to apply for their top-level domains, and the cycle will just start over. Yeah.
All right. And speaking of ICANN, you're going to be at the next ICANN meeting in Toronto, I believe, October 13th, 14th?
Yes, I think that's October 12th, 13th, right around 12th,
there. 13th, somewhere in there. So if you're heading to the ICANN meeting, be sure to look for Jennifer. A couple of final questions for you, Jennifer. Wayne Nelson, our producer, has told me that you are co-authoring your second book titled Domain Names Rewired, slated for release later this year, November timeframe.
Yes, correct.
What was the main impetus for writing the book, and what would people take away from this?
Sure. The impetus was really once I realized that the top-level domain program was moving forward, I knew immediately that all businesses were going to need to understand how to navigate that space. And so I partnered up. Ann Chassers, the former U.S. Commissioner of Trademarks, we wrote our first book, which was Brand Rewired, looking at how brands are evolving. We wrote that book 2 years ago. So we partnered up and took the same approach. We interviewed the top leading brands, top technology companies, top consultants in the domain name space. We interviewed them, and then we were able to see some trends that we thought we could expect as top level domains moved forward. And so it's really meant to be a guide of here's what's happening, here's where we see things moving, here's where all of these other experts see things moving, and then provide a roadmap for how do you develop a new strategy.
Excellent. So it's domain names rewired, but it really speaks to domain names as the focus for a brand, a digital strategy.
Correct. That's right. Right.
Excellent.
It's very brand focused, but I think even, for generics or domainers, that to understand what those people think is happening as the internet shifts will be invaluable information.
Yeah. So that made me think of another question, Jennifer. So we've talked about digital brand strategy and the new TLDs in relation to large corporations. Google applying for 100 plus, Amazon applying for some, Microsoft applying for some. What does it mean for the small investor, the investor that maybe spends, $100,000 or $40,000 a year buying domain names, focusing on .coms, trying to buy the premium generic single word domain names? What's your advice to them as you think about the gTLDs that are going to be launched in, within the year?
Sure. My advice to them is you really need to pay attention to these 900 generics that will launch into the internet, because that's the expansion of your business right there. And you need to understand how could it impact if .com does become diluted. And I'm not saying for sure that it will, but if it does, then how are you evolving the way that you make your money and the way that you position yourself in your portfolio? Because if you look at these 900 plus, they do fall into certain categories, and you might determine where do you think that there's going to be more traction, and be sure that when those doors do open and you can buy those up, that you're in line first.
Yeah, and at least hedging your bets. So any investor, make sure that they want to hedge every bet that they're making. So you're saying that keep it in mind, understand what's coming out, understand how you want to hedge your investments, if at all.
Right, absolutely.
All right.
You certainly don't want to go into it blind and not knowing what's happening and be reacting. You certainly want to, because when those initial periods open, they'll only last for a short period of time. And if you wait too long, if you haven't thought about it and you don't have a plan, then you could find yourself in a really bad spot.
Definitely. All right. If people have follow-up questions for Jennifer, please post it in the comments below, and we'll ask her to come back and answer as many as she can. If you'd like to follow wolfedomain.com, WOLFE domain.com on Twitter to find out where they're speaking, what new videos they have coming out, understand where they're heading in the industry, you can follow them on Twitter at Wolfe Domain. Jennifer Wolfe, founder, president, managing director of wolfedomain.com. Thank you for coming on the show, educating us about the new gTLD landscape, and thank you for being a domain Sherpa.
Thank you.
Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.